History, they say, does not repeat itself, but it often rhymes. Sometimes, however, the echo is so loud, so precise, and so haunting that it feels less like a rhyme and more like a resurrection. To understand the current atmosphere in Burkina Faso, we must go back to the first moment the world truly saw Captain Ibrahim Traoré. It was October 2022. The dust from the leadership change was still settling. The cameras were focused on the entrance of the government building, waiting for the new leader to emerge. The people were expecting a soldier. They were expecting a man in uniform. But when Ibrahim Traoré walked out, a collective gasp seemed to ripple through the crowd. It was a shock that went beyond politics. It was a shock that hit the soul of the nation. He was wearing a military fatigue uniform, but on his head, tilted slightly to the side, was a red beret. For an outsider, it was just a hat, but for a Burkinabe, and for any African who knows their history, that red beret was a lightning bolt. It was a visual trigger that instantly transported millions of people back 35 years into the past. In the 1980s, there was another young captain. He was charismatic. He was slim. He spoke with a fire that could melt chains. He too wore that red beret. His name was Thomas Sankara. He was known as the Che Guevara of Africa, a man who tried to lift his country out of poverty and dependency before his life was tragically cut short in 1987. For 3 decades, the ghost of Thomas Sankara has haunted Burkina Faso. He is the unhealed wound. He is the what if that keeps the elders awake at night. The people loved him. They lost him, and they have been waiting for his return ever since. So when Ibrahim Traoré stepped into the sunlight, wearing that same crimson beret with the same calm demeanor, the same youthful intensity, and the same rank of captain, the effect was hypnotic. It was a massive case of déjà vu. People began to whisper in the markets. "Is it him?" they asked. Not literally, of course. They knew Sankara was gone. But spiritually, the question hung in the air. Had the prayers of a generation finally been answered? Was history offering them a second chance? The resemblance was uncanny. It wasn't just the clothes. It was the energy. Traoré didn't walk with the arrogance of a dictator. He walked with the urgent, purposeful stride of a man who knows he is running against time. When he grabbed the microphone, he didn't use the flowery, diplomatic French of the elite. He used the direct, honest language of the people. He spoke of dignity. He spoke of courage. He spoke of the land of upright men. It was as if an old cassette tape paused in 1987 had suddenly been pressed play again in 2022. This visual connection was dangerous for Traoré. By evoking the image of Sankara, he was walking into a fire. He was inviting a comparison to a saint. If he failed, the disappointment would be crushing. If he was just itchy at acting, the people would tear him apart. You do not wear the red beret of Sankara lightly. It is a heavy crown. It carries the weight of 1,000,000 broken dreams. But as the days turned into weeks, the people realized something even more startling. This young captain wasn't just cosplaying history. He wasn't just dressing up for the cameras. He was making decisions that mirrored the legend. He began to cut government waste. He began to challenge the old treaties. He began to mobilize the youth. The whisper in the streets turned into a roar. The red beret was not a costume. It was a signal. The signal that the spirit of resistance, which many thought had been buried in a shallow grave 35 years ago, had found a new vessel. But with this hope comes a terrible fear, because everyone knows how the first story ended. We know that the first red beret was met with betrayal and bullets. And now, as the world watches this new captain, the question that haunts every mind is not just, is he the new Sankara? The real question is, can he survive the destiny that comes with the name? To truly understand the weight on Captain Traoré's shoulders, we must first understand the man whose shadow he walks in. We must open the history books to a page that is stained with tears. We must talk about Thomas Sankara. For the younger generation watching this, or for those outside of Africa, the name might be new. But in the 1980s, Thomas Sankara was a supernova. He was not your typical politician in a suit and tie. He was a jazz guitarist. He was a feminist before the term was popular. He rode a bicycle to work. He was electric. He took a small, impoverished nation, then known by the colonial name Upper Volta, and he gave it a new identity. He renamed it Burkina Faso, which translates to the land of upright men. It wasn't just a name change, it was a demand for dignity. Sankara had a radical, beautiful dream. He believed that Africa could feed itself. He believed that African women should be free. He planted millions of trees to stop the desert. He vaccinated millions of children in weeks. He famously said, "We must dare to invent the future." He was building a paradise of self-reliance. The people began to believe that after centuries of darkness, the dawn had finally arrived. But dreams especially, the bold ones, are dangerous to the established order. On October 15, 1987, the music stopped. In a hail of gunfire that echoed across the continent, Thomas Sankara was assassinated. He was only 37 years old. The tragedy was Shakespearean. He was not killed by a foreign army, but betrayed by his closest circle, by the very people he called brothers. When he fell, it wasn't just a man who died. A light went out. For the next 3 decades, a heavy silence fell over Burkina Faso. The policies of self-reliance were reversed. The pride was replaced by dependency. The upright men were forced to bend their backs again. Sankara's name was whispered in secret like a forbidden prayer. He became a ghost. A what if, a painful memory of what could have been. This is the wound that has never healed. It is a collective trauma that sits in the heart of every Burkinabe. They lived with the gnawing feeling that their destiny had been stolen from them, interrupted in the middle of a sentence. For 35 years, the people waited. They watched leaders come and go, promising change, but delivering stagnation. They looked for a spark, a sign that the spirit of 1987 was not dead but merely vaping. And then came 2022. When Ibrahim Traoré emerged, it wasn't just his policies that grabbed attention. It was the timing. It felt like the universe was trying to correct a mistake. Here was another captain. Here was another man of the soil. Here was another leader speaking the language of refusal, refusing to be poor, refusing to be subservient. For the people, seeing Traoré is like seeing a bridge being built across a chasm. He represents the possibility of finishing the work that was so violently interrupted. He is the unfinished requiem, finally finding its next note. But this connection is not just poetic, it is terrifying. Because we know that the forces that silenced Sankara, the greed, the fear of change, the hidden enemies have not disappeared. They are still there, watching from the shadows. So as Traoré picks up the torch, the world holds its breath. We are watching a high-wire act of history. Can he succeed where the legend failed? Or is he walking towards the same tragic fate? To answer that, we must look closer at the man himself. We must see if this is just an imitation, or if the spirit has truly returned. De la Fun Thrai, the mirror image. Tam Gung Fan Chiu. Phần này đi sâu vào phân tích những điểm tương đồng đến mức lạnh người giữa hai nhân vật. Chúng ta không chỉ nói về trang phục, mà nói về tư duy và hành động. Đây là phần củng cố mạnh mẽ nhất cho tiêu đề Bóng ma của Sankara. Bạn copy đoạn này nối tiếp vào phần 2 nhé. It is easy to wear a red beret. Anyone can go to a military surplus store and buy a hat. Anyone can memorize a few revolutionary slogans. But you cannot fake the energy. You cannot fake the vibration that a leader emits when they walk into a room. When we place the photos of Thomas Sankara and Ibrahim Traoré side by side, the visual resemblance is striking. But when we dig deeper into their lives, the parallels become almost spooky. It is as if the universe is following a very specific blueprint. Let's look at the data points. First, the rank. Both men rose to power not as generals with chests full of unearned medals, but as captains. In the military hierarchy, a captain is a unique position. He is high enough to command, but low enough to still be in the mud with his soldiers. He is not a distant bureaucrat. He is a field commander. This rank symbolizes action youth and proximity to the pain of the people. Both men wore their rank like a badge of honor, refusing to promote themselves even when they held the highest office in the land. Second, the age. Thomas Sankara became president at the age of 33. Ibrahim Traoré took command at the age of 34. They both represent the generational shift. In a continent often ruled by men in their 70s and 80s, men who are disconnected from the digital age and the aspirations of the youth, these two captains burst onto the scene with the raw energy of a thunderstorm. They speak with the urgency of young men who know that the future is being stolen from them. Third, and perhaps most importantly, the austerity. Sankara was famous for being the poorest president in the world. He sold the government's fleet of luxury Mercedes-Benz cars and forced his ministers to drive the cheapest car available, the Renault 5. He lowered his own salary. He forbade his portrait from being hung in public offices because, as he said, there are 7 million Thomas Sankaras. Now fast forward to 2022. Ibrahim Traoré's first major act. He refused the presidential salary. He kept his captain's pay. He drives in armored combat vehicles, not luxury limousines. He banned ministers from buying expensive cars. This is not a coincidence. This is a deliberate mirroring. Critics might say, oh, Traoré is just copying Sankara's style. It's just good marketing. And perhaps there is some truth to that. Every leader needs a symbol. But you can see in Traoré's eyes that this is not a costume. It is a philosophy. When Traoré speaks, he uses the same hand gestures. He uses the same direct, fearless language. He talks about imperialism and neo-colonialism, not as abstract concepts from a textbook, but as real chains that need to be broken today. He talks about producing what we consume and consuming what we produce, the exact core of Sankara's economic theory. It feels as though Traoré has studied the Sankara operating system and installed it into the hardware of the 21st century. But there is one major difference, and it is a crucial one. Sankara was a dreamer, a romantic revolutionary who perhaps trusted too much. He believed in the goodness of his friends. Traoré, on the other hand, seems to have studied the tragedy of 1907. He moves with a different kind of caution. He is more guarded. He is surrounded by men who are fiercely loyal, but he watches the shadows. He seems to be asking himself the question that we are all asking. Sankara built the dream, but he couldn't protect it. How can I do both? The mirror image is clear. The reflection is perfect. But a reflection can be shattered in an instant. As Traoré begins to implement the very policies that got Sankara killed, the tension rises. Here, he is not just bringing back the style, He is bringing back the substance. And that is where the real danger lies. We have talked about the image. We have talked about the Red Beret. But a revolution is not built on fashion. It is built on factories, on fields, and on concrete. To understand if Traoré is truly the spiritual heir of Sankara, we must look at the blueprints. 35 years ago, Thomas Sankara had a vision that was incredibly advanced for his time. He looked at his country, a leading producer of cotton, and he asked a furious question. Why are we selling our white gold to Europe for pennies only to buy back shirts made from our own cotton at 10 times the price? Sankara launched a movement called Faso Dan Fani. He wanted every official, every citizen, to wear clothes made in Burkina Faso, woven by Burkinabe mothers, using Burkinabe cotton. It was a dream of total industrial independence, but when he died, that dream was dismantled. The factories closed. The foreign imports flooded back in. Now look at what is happening today. Ibrahim Traoré has dusted off those old blueprints. He has declared that the export of raw commodities is a crime against the economy. He is aggressively pushing for the construction of textile processing plants. He is telling the world, if you want our cotton, you buy our shirts. We are not just a farm for the world anymore. We are a factory. But it doesn't stop at clothes. Sankara dreamed of a nation that could feed itself without relying on imported canned food. He wanted to process the tomatoes and the mangoes that rotted in the heat. Today, Traoré is cutting ribbons on new local processing factories in Bobo-Dioulasso. He is banning the import of goods that can be produced locally. Sankara famously mobilized the people to build a railway with their own hands, the Battle of the Rails, to connect the isolated regions. Today, Traoré is obsessively focused on infrastructure, paving roads and planning railway corridors to break the isolation of the Sahel. It is uncanny. It is as if Traoré walked into the presidential office, found a dusty file labeled 1987, unfinished business, and simply started checking off the boxes. Sankara said, plant trees. Traoré is launching green initiatives. Sankara said, empower women. Traoré is placing women in key command and administrative roles. Sankara said, consume what we control. Traoré is making Made in Burkina the only acceptable standard. This is the resurrection of dreams. For the old people in the villages, this is emotional. They see the tractors moving again. They see the looms weaving again. They realize that the bullet that killed Sankara did not kill his ideas. It only delayed them. Traoré is proving a powerful law of physics. You can kill a man, but you cannot kill a vision whose time has come. The ghost of Sankara is not haunting the country to scare people. It is haunting the country to get to work. But this resurrection goes deeper than just economics. It is changing the software of the people's minds. Sankara's greatest achievement wasn't the roads. It was the psychological liberation of the black man. And this is exactly the battlefield where Traoré is fighting his hardest war. Thomas Sankara famously taught that the most dangerous prison is not one made of iron bars or concrete walls. The most dangerous prison is the one inside the mind. He understood that you can feed a man, you can give him a job, and you can pave his road. But if that man still believes he is inferior, if he still looks at his own culture with shame and looks at foreign cultures with envy, he will never truly be free. Sankara called this the decolonization of the mentality. And for decades, children in Burkina Faso went to schools where they learned the history of Europe perfectly, but knew almost nothing about the great empires of their own ancestors. They walked on streets named after the very generals who had conquered their grandfathers. They were subtly taught that civilization was something that came from outside across the ocean, and that their own traditions were backward. This psychological conditioning creates a nation of people who are always looking down, always apologizing for who they are. Ibrahim Traoré has decided to break these mental chains, and he is doing it with symbols that are impossible to ignore. One of the most emotional moments of his presidency was the renaming of the streets. For years, the widest, most beautiful boulevards in the capital were named after foreign leaders. Traoré signed the decrees to take those signs down. He replaced them with the names of African heroes. He replaced them with the names of local chiefs who fought for freedom. This might seem like a small administrative change to an outsider, but to a young child walking to school, it changes everything. When a child looks up and sees Boulevard Thomas Sankara instead of a foreign name, the landscape of their city finally matches the landscape of their heart. It tells them, your history matters. Your heroes are valid. But Traoré is going deeper than just street signs. He is looking at the classroom. His administration is pushing for a reform of the education system. The goal is to integrate local languages and local history into the core curriculum. He wants the next generation of doctors, engineers, and soldiers to be fluent not just in French, but in Mouré, in Dioula, and in Fulfulde. He is sending a message that intelligence does not have to sound European. You can be brilliant, you can be modern, and you can still be fully African. This shift is visible in the arts, in the music, and in the fashion. Just like Sankara promoted the Faso d'Anfani fabric, Traoré is often seen wearing traditional weaving patterns during official state broadcasts. He is normalizing the local aesthetic. He is making it cool to be Burkinabe again. He is telling his people, stop looking for validation from the north. Stop asking for permission to be great. The validation you need is right here in the mirror. This is the hardest work of all. Building a factory takes a year. Building a road takes 2 years. But rebuilding the confidence of a broken people takes a generation. Sankara started this work. He tried to make his people stand tall. But when he was killed, the psychological project was abandoned. The people were told to go back to sleep. Traoré has come to wake them up again. He is shouting to the masses that they are not victims. They are warriors. They are the descendants of kings and queens, and it is time they started acting like it. But as the people begin to lift their heads, as the pride returns, the danger reaches its peak. Because history teaches us a brutal lesson. The world might forgive you for being independent, but it will never forgive you for being proud. And in the shadows, the same betrayal that took Sankara away is waiting for its chance to strike again. Every great tragedy in history has a moment where the hero makes a fatal mistake. For Thomas Sankara, that mistake was not political. It was not economic. It was emotional. His mistake was love. Sankara believed in the sacred bond of brotherhood. He had a best friend, a man he called his brother, a man named Blaise Compaoré. They had eaten from the same bowl. They had fought in the same trenches. They had dreamed the same dream. When intelligence reports began to reach Sankara's desk, warning him that his best friend was plotting against him, Sankara waved them away. He famously told his advisors, "If Blaise wants to kill me, let him. Because if I have to kill my brother to survive, I do not want to live." It was a noble sentiment. It was poetic. But in the ruthless game of geopolitics, it was a death sentence. On that dark afternoon in October 1987, it was the men under the command of that brother who surrounded the building. Sankara walked out to face them with his hands up, wearing a tracksuit, unarmed. He was cut down in a hail of bullets. The lesson of 1987 is brutal, but clear. In the fight for sovereignty, there is no room for naivety. The enemy will not just come from the outside with tanks and planes. The enemy will come from the inside with a smile and a handshake. The enemy will look like you. This brings us to the most chilling question regarding Ibrahim Traoré. Has he learned this lesson? When we observe Captain Traoré, we see a man who is clearly a student of the Sankara archives. He has adopted the dress, the speech, and the policies. But does he possess the survival instinct that Sankara lacked? The evidence suggests that the answer is yes. Traoré moves with a level of vigilance that Sankara did not have. He understands that he is walking through a minefield. Since taking power, there have been whispers of counter-coups, of plots, and of sabotage. But unlike the romantic revolutionary of the 80s, Traoré does not dismiss them. He has purged the security apparatus of suspicious elements. He keeps his circle tight. He sleeps with one eye open. He understands that the old guard, the networks of power that benefited from the corruption of the past, are not sleeping. They are angry. They have lost their access to the national cake, and they are desperate to get it back. Traoré seems to operate on a new philosophy. I will die for my people, but I will not let my revolution die because of my blindness. He has done something else that is strategically brilliant to protect himself. He has decentralized the defense of the nation. He has empowered the VDP volunteers for the defense of the homeland. He has put weapons and trust directly into the hands of the villagers and the common people. By doing this, he has created a human shield around the presidency. He knows that a small group of elite soldiers can be bought or bribed to betray him. But you cannot bribe an entire nation that has tasted freedom. If the enemies want to remove Traoré today, they don't just have to go through his bodyguards. They have to go through the millions of young people who see him as their last hope. But the tension is palpable. Every time he appears in public, there is a collective holding of breath. The memory of Judas is etched into the national psyche. The people are praying that this time the story will have a different ending. They are praying that this captain knows how to spot the knife before it is put in his back. The ghosts of the past are screaming a warning: trust no one. As Traoré navigates this treacherous path, he is carrying a torch that was extinguished 35 years ago. The flame is flickering in the wind. The wolves are circling. But this time, the shepherd is armed and the flock is awake. The final question remains. The torch has been passed. The dream has been resurrected. But what is his final message to us? What does he need from the millions of Africans watching from across the ocean? Ibrahim Traoré, the reincarnation of Thomas Sankara. Perhaps that is the wrong question to ask, because to look for a reincarnation is to look backward, and Ibrahim Traoré is a man looking forward. He is not Thomas Sankara. He is Ibrahim Traoré. Sankara was the prophet. Traoré is the builder. Sankara was the dreamer. Traoré is the guardian. Sankara planted the tree. Traoré is watering it with sweat and defending it with steel. He stands on the shoulders of the giant who came before him. He has taken the wisdom of 1987 and combined it with the realities of 2024. He is the evolution of the revolution. But there is one variable in this equation that has changed, and that variable is you. 35 years ago, when Sankara was isolated and surrounded the world, was different. There was no internet. There was no social media. The diaspora was disconnected. When they killed him, they did it in the dark, and the world only found out when it was too late. We, as a global family, were not there to protect him. We let him die alone. That is the burden we all carry. But today, the lights are on. Today, a young man in New York, a student in London, and a mother in the Caribbean can see what is happening in Ouagadougou in real time. We are the shield that Sankara never had. The ghost of Sankara has returned not to haunt us, but to test us. It is asking us a simple question. I gave you a second chance. I gave you another captain. What will you do this time? Will we just watch the videos and click like? Or will we become the active defense of this vision? Traore cannot do this alone. A single man, no matter how brave, can be removed. But you cannot remove a movement. You cannot assassinate an idea that has taken root in the minds of millions. So do not just worship the man. Protect the mission. Speak his name in your conversations. Defend the truth against the lies in the media. Invest in the vision of self-reliance. The torch has been passed. The flame that flickered and died in 1987 is burning bright again in the hands of this young captain. It is fragile. The winds are blowing hard. But as long as we stand around it, as long as we cup our hands together to shield it, it will not go out. The ghost of Sankara can finally rest because the spirit of the people has finally awakened. La patrie ou la mort nous vaincrons. Fatherland or death we shall overcome.